Alright, 4 months I have set this series aside, only to focus on other videos that I've currently had in mind, like covering that of Unorthodox Kid, Maple 9, and even diving into the channel of Uncle Liam. But now, we get into a series that I can fully fulfill my promise on. This is Midwest Angelica, a cosmic analog horror series focused on a corpse floating through space that is identified as AZ001. Not just this, but we'll be looking into the eventual terror and spread throughout the United States. This series is a long one, with 3 main playlists revolving around the story: Midwest Angelica Act 1, Interlude A, and Act 2. But in the process of finding this out, I have managed to organize a timeline that will correctly tell the story in order. Yeah, this series is gonna take a bit to cover. With the series still ongoing, I cannot guarantee any promises about making a second video covering this series. And if there is some things that I might have left out regarding the timeline, then by all means point it out. So for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy this gem for the night. The date is April 5th, 1985. Greeted by a man by the name of Dr. Lucas Michaels, telling us that they managed to pick up on an anomalous biosignature around Jupiter's orbit. They originally thought that the tools used to pick up on this were malfunctioning. However, they seemed to be perfectly fine, so the team decided to look into it further. And within a month, they managed to get a closer look at this anomalous object, which they have labeled as AZ001. We go forward a couple of months to November 1985, and the same team led by Dr. Lucas Michaels has found something revolutionary about AZ001. It is, in fact, alive. Or so they thought. They have reasons to believe that AZ001 is actually a corpse, wandering aimlessly in the outer belt of our solar system. So now, this is where we switch our video from home to Coliseum. Our second video opens up as an archive, the date, May 23rd, 1986. We're immediately brought into a conversation led by 2 unknown individuals who will be important later on in the series, as they are none other than Dr. Gamma Churchill and Robert Spencers. They're speaking to Dr. Lucas Michaels about AZ001, first showing him a couple of image reconstructions done on his brain while he was asleep. He replies back saying that he occasionally sees things like that whenever he dreams, which all started during the founding of AZ001. However, he is unsure if the anomaly may or may not have some sort of correlation with his dreams. But he believes that it may be trying to speak to him somehow, and even feels like he's a different person entirely. Dr. Churchill asks to elaborate on what exactly this could mean, as Dr. Michaels doesn't even have a complete understanding of what this could mean, but it's almost as if he's experiencing some sort of deja vu. Only this time, he feels as if he was in the same place, but before the existence of our universe, and even catching glimpses of his life back then. But he knows that it's not him. Dr. Churchill reassures him that Dr. Spencers had been working in occult research for the United States intelligence community for nearly a decade, and that Churchill's background is in psychoactive drugs and psychology research, and that they are highly involved in that field as well. Dr. Michaels asks if the 2 knows what's going on, as they are still left a bit unsure, mainly due to the lack of evidence and data gathered from the brain scans. But for now, Dr. Michaels will be appointed as the head of the new organization to study AZ001, and will work in collaboration with NASA and even being funded by the United States government. As the conversation wraps up, Home is now beginning operations as of March of 1987, led by Dr. Lucas Michaels. However, a new branch named Home Delta will also begin their operations on March 13th, 1987, and is led by Dr. Robert Spencers and Dr. Gamma Churchill. But Dr. Michaels was never made aware of the existence of this new branch of Home. We flip back to the home video, as now Dr. Lucas Michaels has found the trajectory of AZ001, and that it will reach the vicinity of Earth's orbit by 1999. In response, NASA had decided to form a group known as the Division of Heavenly Operation and Material Examination, aka HOME, which will be used to study AZ001's composition, trajectory, and even making contact with it in 1999. but this group is also designated to hide the existence of AZ-001 as well. So Dr. Michaels is now missing, and his current whereabouts are unknown. But this immediately raises some kind of suspicion to me about Home Delta. They haven't even made the group itself public to anyone else besides the 2 founding members. So it could either be that, or maybe being influenced by AZ-001 itself, as he has stated that it can somehow talk to him in a certain degree, allowing him to see life before he was even created. However, the disappearance at the moment cannot be traced back to either Home Delta or even AZ-001 itself, so this will remain as a large mystery to us. A few years go by, as it's now August of 1995. Dr. Michaels has been replaced by Dr. Ray O'Connor, as they figured out that the corpse is now emanating detectable brainwaves, meaning that AZ-001 could still theoretically be alive, as his corpse is now getting closer and closer to Earth by the years. But now, we jump to January 16th, 1999. A large chunk of AZ-001, known as the Alpha Chunk, had managed to separate from the main body, as it now enters our atmosphere. So far, Home has managed to track where exactly AZ-001 is going to land, as crews are quickly sent out to go and check the site of where it's determined to land. And some on the site even speculate themselves that AZ-001 is indeed alive. Meanwhile, on that same day, on the Starfield Ranch, a rancher by the name of Evryn Jones is awakened by the sound of his dogs barking late at night. His son Colin begins to record what happens shortly after. Making his way to the ranch prairie, Colin is wondering what may have happened to one of the dogs, as his father goes to grab the rifle from inside, but just at the end of the recording, we see a small mass of what could be AZ-001. However, several minutes of the footage is left too degraded to even view anymore, except only 3 frames that are given to us. Well then, with the footage shown to us, we can see small chunks of AZ-001 seemingly latching onto whatever life form may be nearby, almost like a leech in a way, but instead, it starts to seemingly sprout out more appendages in a short amount of time. We finally get to go back to the footage that was taken of this infection spreading around the Starfield Ranch. As the recording goes by, we're left the cryptic scene of what has now happened to Evryn Jones. Trying to defend himself, but with no luck. as he is now assimilated into AZ-001. But don't think this is all over. As Collins desperately tries to flee his own home from AZ-001, he tries to call out for his mom, only to find out that she too had been assimilated. Near the end of these recordings, we catch one last glimpse of AZ-001 in the sunset as the word family pops up on the screen, almost as if Collins is the next victim to AZ-001's intense and quick infection throughout the prairie. But at the end of that video, we now know that AZ-001 can infect either small or large life forms, clinging onto it like a parasite and simply using it to further its spread. But not just this, we can also manage to easily debunk that any small firearm will not work against AZ-001. Our next video opens up as classified material from home. There's been updates on a group studying how AZ-001 may or may not infect people in close proximity to each other. They decide to test samples from AZ-001s on white-tailed deers and coyotes, finding out that the specimens continue to induce minimal to almost no mutations at all. But with recent experimentations with specimens of just onions, they have actually managed to uncover how the contagion affects organism cells. With the evidence shown to us, we can see the quick decomposition of the onion cells, seemingly being ravaged to the point where there is no trace shown to us that any of the onion cells had managed to survive this rapid infection. Not just this, but with the new results coming in about AZ-001, they have managed to find that it actually possesses some level of intelligence, as this alone can present a clear danger to all of the United States. Not just this, but research personnel is recommended to destroy any remnants of AZ-001 as quick as possible, and by any means necessary. But now, Home has managed to give this a much more fitting name for AZ-001, as it will now be referred to as the Star Kill. The next video opens up as an incident report, detailing the series of events on January 8th, 1999. Dr. Andrew Evans returns to the Alpha Chunk for further analysis about the Star Kill, as we later get an audio recording of the following events.
We're reaching coordinate point 1, over. You okay?
I'm fine.
Bio levels are low. Let's do result containing protocol.
This is it, right here. I want this area marked, just for sample collection.
On it. Marking area, over.
That's all we're gonna need. Request retrieval team.
Requesting retrieval team at Alpha Chunk Point A, over.
Around 12:17 p.m., Dr. Evans returns to the psychological contamination lab at Home HQ, simply just commuting around the lab, putting the sample from the Alpha Chunk in storage, refilling a water cooler that's believed to have taken longer than normal to obtain, and then going over to Dr. Ray O'Connor to make some small talk about the sample he's gotten. Pretty simple so far.
Hey, I brought you some water. Thought you might have wanted a cup.
Thanks, Andrew. Were you able to get the results you wanted?
Fortunately, much of the Alpha Chunk was too necrotic to really get any good data and sample from it. We'll likely have to find some Alpha Chunk connected to the main body of AZ-001.
Sorry to hear that. I think I might be able to get you the new data you want once you figure it out. So I'll have to get back to you tomorrow on that.
That's alright. We can discuss more about it tomorrow after the meeting.
So far, nothing unusual is happening, as Dr. Evans just goes back to work as usual. No other interactions happened until around 18 minutes later, as Dr. Evans begins to display some unusual behavior. Well, it isn't wrong. 2 minutes later, Dr. Evans departs to another part of the Home HQ facility, as he's now in the storage room, but for unknown reasons. As one person enters the storage room with him, Evan asks, "Wait, who are you?" During the autopsy, we're shown multiple scans of what exactly was happening inside of Dr. Evans, as multiple dark spots are inside of his body and his brain being taken over physically by the Starkill. We know just how quick the Starkill would spread now, with not just small or big animals, but also with humans, taking them as hosts, but what sets this all off is the conclusion. Dr. Evans' death is ruled as an assassination by a third party, though much remains unknown at this time. Assassination by a third party. That doesn't sound right at all. We've seen just how deadly and how quick the Starkill can act around different life forms, either latching onto them or fully managing to take them over completely. But calling this an assassination, that just doesn't make any bit of sense. We understand the purpose of Home is to keep the Starkill away from the public eye, but even that excuse is invalid. Due to the events at the Starfield Ranch, at this point, why continue to hide something that they themselves cannot even contain anymore? Let alone cover up one of their researchers' deaths. Well, we're right back to Coliseum. The video opens up as another archive for a new project by Home Delta, as none other than Project Babylon. During this meeting, we get to know just a little more about the Starkill, as it's described as a collective hive mind that operates as a single organism, and that all the chunks of the Starkill are seemingly connected to each other telepathically to speak to one another by massive swaths of distance. The once rotting corpse of a forgotten deity had finally decided to show itself to us. Its intelligence alone is frightening for even humans to somewhat grasp, as it's greater compared to that of a supercomputer. As for the way it speaks to itself, Oma decided to dub this network as the Akashic Plane. The Akashic Plane is described as a non-physical plane of existence that contains a record of all thoughts, emotions, and even events that haven't even happened yet. This single organism can contain and process memories that it has ever assimilated during its existence, meaning that even humans alone cannot fathom such intelligence to their own. And to put it lightly, it is an evolved life form, a life form greater to even us humans. But this is why they have decided to create Project Babylon, to seemingly use the Starkill's biological framework to help further humans in the next evolutionary step, to try to help level the playing field against this hyper-intelligent organism. On February 8th, a missing persons PSA was shown to us.
Don't try that again. Why doesn't he come? I've got everything all figured out. Top to bottom, smooth as silk. Everything's falling apart. Can't trust nobody, nothing.
John Carlisle, Aaron Matthias, David Rodney, and Sarah Withrow, all seemingly going missing on the same day, but for unknown reasons as of now. On February 11th, 1999, the Long Pine Police Department Dispatch Center received a 911 call from an unknown caller ID.
911, please state your emergency.
I'm at 876 Pine Lane in Long Pine, right next to the church. And I can't really say for certain, but there's some kind of sacrifice going on.
Okay, we'll be right there. Could you elaborate, please?
Yeah, it's a human sacrifice. I hear screams. It seems to be like a pagan ritual or something of the sort.
Okay. Just hold tight. We'll be right there. Please stay on the line.
After the distressing call, 2 officers are soon called onto the site, Officer Sam Page and Officer Andrew Webster. They both entered the area that the call was made, stumbling into what seems to be an abandoned church. A little after, Officer Andrew Webster had managed to take a photograph of an interesting piece of evidence for us. One depicting that of a human body with some strange things being pointed out inside of it. The picture reads, "A gift of the blood of an angel, phantom in its appearance, but inside it churns with flesh and blood of the stars. The blessed walk in silence, blissfully closer to a sacred realm. Ascended beyond mortals, we have become apostles of Azazel. Gift of the blood of an angel, phantom in its appearance, but churns inside with the flesh and blood of stars." Well, if that alone doesn't scream out towards the Starkill seemingly being praised as this otherworldly deity by a small cult, then I don't know what else would. It's described as being ascended beyond mortals, but to say that the blessed walk in silence, blissfully closer to a sacred realm, well, it's not that confusing to piece together. It's simply referring to how the Starkill goes and affects any life forms nearby. But the last part is definitely something else. We have become apostles of Azazel. Azazel is described as being a fallen angel, seemingly responsible for introducing humans to forbidden knowledge. So for the small cult to say themselves that they are apostles of them, I don't exactly know how, but we'll hopefully get to see why later on in the video. As we go back, we're met with another piece of evidence, a picture of what seems to be some kind of strange tower, but this also has something to say. Altar, an offering of souls to the body of the fallen, reconstruction of God's realm, infinite in its cycle of life. Death but a moment of passing time. He is infinity incarnate, an offering of souls to the body of the fallen, infinite in its cycle of life, in that he is infinity incarnate. I don't really know about that. Knowing this is a small cult that has now built up its following around the Starkill, it wouldn't exactly be safe to try to say that the members of said cult had now offered their own bodies to please it as a deity. But to try and say that the Starkill is infinity incarnate isn't exactly expanded upon just yet, so let's just keep going through this series to try and at least understand it a bit better. With Officer Page now completely out, we at least still have Officer Webster to help continue the search of what exactly is going on, with body cam footage shown to us, showing that he's currently inside of a wooded area, but then his camera catches something that is none other than one of these altars. As Officer Webster is left almost stunned by how large this altar is, he decides to get closer, taking photos of what exactly this thing is. But as he switches his body cam back on, we're immediately met with a very disturbing sight. There are people still breathing, moving around almost robotically inside of this altar, completely leaving them stunned. Before we can even grasp what exactly is happening, Officer Webster flees the scene, suspecting that someone may be following him.
Hello?
Despite the person that had been stalking Officer Webster at the side of this altar, this one is rather interesting. If we take a closer look at this figure, we can easily spot something new about the Starkill, as there are random appendages growing out of either the person's neck or the back. We can also possibly piece together that the Starkill may be using humans, not just to leech off of them, but to manipulate them, and possibly turn them to kill others now. The man seen in the footage, however, has not been identified, as Officer Webster was left in an unknown condition, but shortly after this moment, unmarked military personnel had retrieved the body along with much of the footage that was left on the body cam. A CIA operative, none other than Robert Spencer, had assumed command of the surrounding area and even threatened the Long Pine Police Department to remain quiet regarding this following incident. So now we know that Home Delta is indeed going to be playing some kind of major role in this world, not just to be a random branch out from Home entirely, but to seemingly cover up Home's mistake of keeping the Starkill away from public attention. But with this incident, it is for certain that Home's entire mission had now gone south. The video starts out as an analysis report from the Xenobiology Research Group. Emergent Starkill research, the process of communication between unique instances of Starkill, including the instance known as AZ001, has yet to be fully researched. New findings indicate that communication between unique instances occurs on an information plane parallel to the local reality. After that, we get an audio report from Dr. Stanley Vega from the Xenobiology Research Group in regards to findings associated with something new called Podolsky neurons.
While we previously had a rough understanding of how the Starkill infection assimilates foreign biomatter, and that its methodology for doing so seemingly depends on what intentions it has, we, until recently, failed to understand how different pieces of the alpha chunk seemingly all become aware of new information, even if its pieces are long distances apart from each other. Recent experimentation revealed that certain alpha chunk samples animate a unique energy signature not previously encountered in prior studies. We've discovered that this energy signature becomes more detectable in parts of the alpha chunk where large concentrations of what we fittingly called Podolsky neurons are present. Because of their presence in AZ001, we are of the belief that these Podolsky neurons are part of the entity's central nervous system. Specifically, they are responsible for transmitting information signals to different parts of the entity's body. The observation that different pieces of the alpha chunk all become aware of the same information simultaneously, despite their masses not being physically connected, leads us to believe that Podolsky neuron signals operate on a principle similar to quantum entanglement.
So, with all of that, we now know that despite the chunks of the Starkill seemingly being scattered across the United States, they will continue to telepathically communicate to each other, taking in more and more information, as this long-range network of Podolsky neurons have been dubbed by Home as the Akashic Plane. We were first introduced to this during the second showing of Colosseum, as this is a non-physical plane of existence. Instead, now it is being used to telepathically communicate from one chunk to another. So now, we're at the end of Act 1. The final video of this act being fairly simple, as Holm had decided to show us the observed stages of the Starkill's infestation across the country. Stage 1, a sustenance hunt. During this stage of the Starkill's existence, it will begin to absorb most available biomass to sustain itself for all subsequent stages, using this biomass to eventually grow even larger, whether it's that of small animals or even humans themselves. But now, we get to stage 2, intelligence accumulation. During this stage, the Starkill will begin to hunt only for the most intelligent species available for assimilation, which, that at the moment, is humans. As we get into stage 3, this is where we begin to observe most of what the Starkill's goal may eventually be for this entire series, as it will begin to replicate and eventually spread out even more. If given enough biomass, the Starkill will begin to use it to manufacture novel entities from itself using the biomass's structural hubs. These hubs, which include that of altars, which we recently saw in Azazel, as its main use is to produce smaller Starkill lifeforms, and even that of temples, which produce larger lifeforms. However, we haven't actually seen any of these temples as of yet, but the part that Holm is most worried about is its hypothetical 4th stage, one that has been speculated and based on critical mass calculations at the moment. Holm is completely unsure of when this stage will happen. However, the network is predicted to grow to the following size within a year based on current available data given to us by Holm. But if we thought things didn't get worse, the video ends off of the screen, as it may be the hypothetical 4th, the Starkill continuing to spread across the United States and affecting larger swaths of distance that are now nearly the size of states themselves. We're placed back into Coliseum with another archive about a new thing that Home Delta had recently developed called the Deathbringers. Not just this, but they've also worked on another thing that is meant to combat against the Starkill itself by using its own biological framework. And finally, showing us the Coliseum site, which will be used by Home Delta as an advanced military training facility. We're brought into a recording of a live training by the newly created Deathbringers against any revived Starkill samples in the Coliseum site. Well, that's a bit unexpected. During the training, it appears that a large mass of the Starkill had seemingly revived, only to be killed again, but then out of nowhere, the Deathbringer at the site had been killed by yet another revived Starkill sample. Despite all the efforts that Home Delta is trying to do to at least halt any progress that the Starkill is making, it appears that nothing is working against it. Small weapons were already useless against it, but trying to turn its own flesh against itself may not even work against it as well. As we continue through the 4th archive, we're brought some interesting things about Starkill stem cell properties, saying that, when properly introduced into a host organism, can actually fortify the host cell's natural resistances, as well as promote rapid cell regeneration upon cell deaths. These augmented host cells can hypothetically increase human endurance to physical damage, aging, and diseases, as well as provide immunity to subsequent Starkill infections. While all of those sounds absolutely amazing to any normal human that would ever come across this discovery of Starkill stem cells, the tests themselves proved to be absolutely lethal to any who decided to step up. all of those men had faced horrific consequences of these tests. The first one resulting in the host being infected and amalgamated, the fourth resulting in their organs liquefying, the 13th facing horrific cellular breakdown, and the final one, test 27, resulting in their skin melting right off. All of these tests, to seemingly try to get closer to reaching the same level as a star kill, had taken a complete nosedive. However, some tests have resulted in some survivors, but only aided with cybernetic life support. So, let's bring one of them in. Test 287. This single individual had finally endured the horrific consequences of the Starkill stem cells. But apparently, these very biomechanical soldiers is what forms the very backbone of Home Delta's military, using their own men as test subjects, raising a military made only possible by the Starkill's own tissue. If Home Delta hadn't already raised suspicions before the very start of the series, it's now beginning to raise even more. Because what exactly is Dr. Gamma and Dr. Spencer's end goal for Home Delta? Is it really trying to eradicate any and all signs of the Starkill? Or is it to try and help change people's lives forever, by benefiting them with an alien substance that they themselves cannot even control the results? The Starkill is constantly changing, adapting to whatever is happening around it, whether it was in the past or even possible future. It will not stop changing, and becoming possibly unpredictable for Home to even manage. This is the start of the Babylon Project. The video opens up as Dr. Robert Spencers greets us, marking the 12-year anniversary of the Babylon Project and the founding of Home Delta. This recording serves as a way to forward the progress of the Babylon Project, telling us that the containment of Home HQ had continued to progress at an exponential rate, and that 75% of Home staff had already been infected, yet continue operations as phantoms. But something comes up, saying that the Starkill biomass that's currently inside of Home HQ had now reached the Temple classification, and that Wraith classification entities may be birthed by the Temple in as soon as 12 days, and begin a new operation as soon as they can. This operation being none other than Operation Homebound, and ending the recording telling us that the Deathbringer squads are prepared for immediate action.
Dr. Churchill, we're preparing for the final descent into Home HQ now. Mission will commence in 48 hours.
Good. Spencer, I have a request.
What is it, sir?
Dr. Stanley Vega of the Xenobiology Group has been researching the Akashic Plane. I need you to retrieve him and his work, but under no circumstances should you allow him to learn the true nature of Home Delta.
Understood. What should be done if he's already infected?
He won't be. He works in the BSL-4 lab. We've determined that sector to be clean, and it's projected to be clean for at least 10 more days. If he's visibly infected, eliminate him. Otherwise, we will conduct a SIM test to determine if he has phantom blood. Retrieve his lab assistant too, Dr. Solomon Ezra. Same rules apply.
If you don't mind me asking, sir, what are you planning with him?
My plans with Vega have nothing to do with your job. This is for your own good, Spencer. The most I can tell you is that it involves research into the Akashic Plane. Speaking of which, have you retrieved the new info on Lucas Michaels?
Yes, I have. It's in the data room. I think you'll be interested in our findings. We're not sure what to make of it yet.
Good. I'm looking forward to it. When you return, we'll run the SIN test at Nazareth site and continue operations as planned. We're on schedule.
Understood. And for Operation Homebound?
It will commence April 4th.
So, that was pretty simple to take in, but I'd like to take a bit to regard one certain individual that they pointed out. That being none other than Dr. Lucas Michaels, who we haven't even heard from for 4 whole years. Ever since the start of the series, he was the leading member of Home, but was subsequently taken out in August of 1995 and replaced by Dr. Ray O'Connor. But now we know that Home Delta is possibly behind something that went under Home's radar this entire time, covering up their true nature during this whole scenario ever since their founding, but now has decided to take Dr. Stanley Vega and Dr. Solomon Ezra from the Xenobiology Research Group to do further research into the Akashic Plane. But now we have a deadline of when Operation Homebound will begin, on April 4th, 1999. After the dialogue between the two, we're brought into a recording of the Delta Squad infiltrating Home HQ. As the squad splits up, one of the pairs led by Dr. Robert Spencers goes to grab the final sample collections, while the others go and grab Dr. Stanley Vega, telling him that they've identified a potential risk in the BSL labs, and is required to be taken to the quarantine zone for a mandatory screen for inspection. Dr. Vega assures them that the room they're currently in has the highest safety level in Home HQ, and shouldn't have any risk of cross-contamination in the last 2 months. But regardless, the team will still have to take Dr. Vega, but finds that Dr. Ezra was transferred back to the main facility. After that, the SIN tests are now being performed at the Nazareth site. The first person to step up is Dr. Vega.
Okay, Dr. Vega, I'm assuming you're familiar with the process of a SIN test, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, great. So I'm going to ask you a series of questions and you are to answer truthfully. Once the test is complete, we'll know if you are infected or not. That being said, here's the first question. It's Christmas morning and you're with your family. Your wife hands you a wrapped gift. What do you do next?
Well, of course, I'd thank my wife and open the present, carefully unraveling the ribbons, and then I'd probably give her a hug.
Next question. It's early in the morning and you see a UFO in the sky, illuminated by the light of dawn. What are you thinking?
I'd probably be a bit confused, but I'd probably think of it rationally. Could it potentially be a balloon, a plane, a helicopter? A UFO implies that it's merely unidentified. It could be entirely prosaic.
Okay, last question. You have decided to participate in a charity event for your local church. Why did you make this decision?
Well, I was born and raised Catholic, and I think if I had the opportunity to give to those less fortunate, I would.
Thank you, Dr. Vega. Your results came clean. Please exit to the door on your right and remain seated in the waiting room until you are called. Thank you again for your cooperation. Dr. Ezra, are you familiar with the SIN test?
Yes, I am.
All right. As you know, I'm going to be asking you a series of questions. Answer them truthfully. At the end, we will be able to determine if you are infected or not. Let's begin. First question. You work at a competitive company. The promotion comes down to either you or your coworker. What do you do?
I would work hard and try to beat him. I would think, why should he be the one to get a promotion? I, of course, would be the one doing the work. He was just lucky.
Next question. It's a Saturday night and you decide to cook dinner for the whole family. What made you make this decision?
If I were to do that, it would be because I was hungry.
Okay, next. You see a man and woman embracing each other in a field. There are white clouds dotted against a blue sky. What are you thinking in this moment?
I don't know. I'm not sure. Why would I be in the field? But what purpose does it serve? What is the purpose of the sky?
Do you go to church, Dr. Ezra?
Is this part of the test?
Answer the question, Ezra.
I do.
Okay, let me ask you another question. Do you believe in God?
I do. I said I go to church.
Very well. Let's say you're poor and don't have any food. You've received bread from a stranger, but it's only enough for one person and your son is on the brink of complete starvation. What do you do next?
I would eat the bread, of course. I would be hungry. Any sane person would do the same.
Would you say your knowledge of the world is greater than anybody you've met?
Yes, I would say that applies to me. Actually, I know it does.
And what about your concept of infinity? Can you see it clearly?
Yes, I can.
Code 66, calling. Administer asphyxiation agent.
Code 66, error. Task cannot be completed. Error.
With that, Dr. Ezra had turned out to be infected by the Starkill. Later, we're brought into a medical report by Home Delta, showing the scans of what happened to Dr. Robert Spencer, showing that inside of him was an infection site from the Starkill that could have easily been caused by Dr. Ezra suddenly lashing out at him during the recording. At the moment, Robert Spencer is currently in critical condition and will forever be bound inside of a cryopod. Back at the Babylon site, Dr. Churchill is speaking to Dr. Spencer's, telling him that this wasn't according to the scenario, disregarding Dr. Ezra from the Nazareth site and placing it under a strict lockdown. But for now, the only thing they can do is keep him inside the pod, trying to slow down the infection as much as they can, fearing that they might lose all the knowledge that he carries altogether. But now, Dr. Churchill is researching more into some of the Starkill samples that they've gathered, believing that it could help reverse the infection, and possibly grant that of immortality. but this test will happen on April 4th, the same day that Operation Homebound will take place. Alright, I think we're ready to finish up both Easter and Coliseum now. Our video opens up as an Akashic Interactions test, the participant of this being none other than Dr. Stanley Vega. The way these tests are performed are simple. Podolsky samples are inserted into the spinal cord via incision in the neck, and only 3 samples are administered and results are recorded via the electrical activity of the brain. As the first test starts, it starts off, well, rather simple. Dr. Vega shows a bit of distress, but after the test, he is asked to report his thought process and has to re-enter his personal information, with some subtle changes being that in his date of birth and his baseline phrase. Dr. Vega still believes that the test is a screening for any possible infections. During the second test, Dr. Vega is showing more visible signs of distress, but after he re-entered his personal information, we see that his believed name is now John Carlisle, which was one of the missing peoples that were a part of the small cult during the events of Azazel. His date of birth, now April 10th, 1946. His current city in Long Pine, Nebraska, and his baseline phrase is now changed to "I pray every morning" and. But what's intriguing the most about this to Home Delta is that Dr. Vega expresses some kind of close knowledge to the man. But how exactly does he know that much about John Carlisle? As we go into our third test, Dr. Vega is now beginning to almost writhe in pain now, and with the final re-entry of his information, all of them are now replaced by one word: Easter. I don't exactly know the full understanding of what this could possibly mean, so we'll hopefully catch onto it later in the series. With the second to last archive left from Coliseum, we open up to Dr. Robert Spencer's, still currently in his cryopod in the Babel site. An incoming call from Churchill plays out.
Spencer, it's me. I've given up my rank as Admiral of Home Delta. That title is going to you in preparation of Operation Homebound. You will have control over the Tower of Babel, and you'll be able to control the Deathbringer squads entirely with your mind. The pieces have been in place since the beginning. It's unfortunate that you ended up in this state, but this is the only way. Once I finalize Project Babylon, it's all up to you. This battle is yours to decide.
So, Churchill is no longer in charge of Home Delta, and gave it to Spencer's in preparation for Operation Homebound, which we still don't really know what exactly this operation alone could mean, or even being led up to until now, but we'll hope to see what exactly that means later. As we move on to the last archive of Coliseum, we get an update about Akashic Plane research at Home HQ being contained and secured by Home Delta. It seems that trying to get some kind of index of Dr. Stanley Vega had seemingly been deleted without a certain cause. However, the research on information retrieval from the Akashic Plane is still continuing at Home Delta. But then we get a strange scene in front of us, seemingly as a new tool that Home Delta had been designing just for information retrieval alone. This tool being the Akashic Interference Probe. This probe will begin to extract the Podolsky neuron cluster to hopefully transmit something directly back to Home HQ as a way to learn more about the Starkill and hope for some kind of way to stop it still. We're now getting closer to finishing up Interlude A, with only 2 videos left being none other than Exodus and Nero. Not just this, but we will eventually see what all this build-up towards Operation Homebound really is. So, let's not waste any more time. Our second to last video for Interlude A starts off as a Babylon project log from Home Delta. Dr. Churchill opens up the video, the date being April 4th, 1999. Today is the day that Project Babylon will now be completed. Not just this, but Starkill stem cell insertion into Dr. Spencer's will occur at sundown, possibly making him one of the most powerful humans in all of history. Once this has happened, the Tower of Babel will activate. The Deathbringers will all be connected through the local Akashic network and fully controlled by Dr. Spencer's himself. Thus, Operation Homebound will finally begin at midnight, and hopefully end the Starkill's relentless assault on humanity altogether. Dr. Churchill closes off the video saying that he has absolute faith in humanity's victory over the Starkill. After this, we're brought to another part of Project Babylon, the Catalyst initiation.
Dr. Evryn, keep monitor 4 on the main screen. We're waiting on the all clear for insertion.
Roger that. We have a safety clearance. Bacterial contamination threat is 0. Infection site has reached standstill. Akasha team is running final checks on the tower now.
Clock is running. On my command, begin the insertion protocol.
Ready.
T-minus 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Mark.
The injection doesn't go as planned.
Catastrophic energy spike detected.
Dr. Spencer had now been assimilated by the Starkill. In a matter of just a few milliseconds, it had managed to spread through a large part of the Babel site. Dr. Churchill comes back to us, telling us that Project Babylon has failed, eventually running out of the site so as to not get caught by the Starkill. Once out of the site, we open back up to Dr. Churchill in a secure bunker at a classified location. He quickly gets to work on setting up an Akashic receiver node as to figure out what command that the Starkill might give to the Deathbringers, believing that they might be used as some kind of pawn. Once the Akashic receiver is set up, we're brought to a screen of some kind of unintelligible language being sent to us through the Akashic receiver. Churchill is quick to figure out that the language being detected is from the Starkill's native tongue, eventually using the Akashic probe to decode the messages into something more intelligible for us. The message reads out to us:
West, time 0, no surviving eyes, restart, 30 moon, west.
April 13th. The Starkill is probably planning on faking Operation Homebound.
Churchill, I have found you. You are careless. I find it humorous how you continue to poke at the sleeping bear, yet you feel fate like the plague. A sad specimen, unable to comprehend your limitations. I must remark, the toys you left me give me great delight, as if to look upon a child's crude drawings. They are almost completely useless, save for the creation of a veil to act as a magician's toolkit. A veil to mask the truth to your governing body. Once your toys have served their temporary purpose, they shall be discarded. I'm sending some to you now as a parting gift. I do hope you enjoy your own creations. Best of luck to you, from Admiral Nero.
So, this is no longer Dr. Spencer we're talking to. Instead, we're now in contact to a new being that was created from the aftermath of the failure of Project Babylon. During the creation of Admiral Nero, it had decided to send out some of the Deathbringer militia towards Churchill and Evryn, but despite being called mere mortal, are taken out with these by the two.
We're lucky there were only a few. The jammer must have confused them. Evryn, your name will now be Fakebringer. Your mission will be to infiltrate the Babel site and relay any information regarding the Starkill's plans. The suit will protect your biosignature. From there, we will begin our retaliation.
Sir, I'm willing to die for humanity.
May God bless you.
Despite all the things that have happened in Home Delta, Churchill is still willing to bring the Starkill to its knees by any means possible, whether it's to send his own colleagues out to possibly die during their tasks, or simply inventing something that could stall the Starkill for just a moment. Churchill is willing to take that step. As Exodus comes to a close, we're met with one final log from the Babylon project. Churchill tells us that he is currently in a safe location, no transmissions coming in or out from where he is at the moment, telling us that the infiltration attempt at the Babel site by Fakebringer has been completed, obtaining information and exiting to finally send it off to Churchill securely. But according to Fakebringer, Admiral Nero is planning up to set up some kind of conference after Operation Homebound with the Secretary of Defense and members of NASA administration. And that is when Churchill will make his first move, a declaration of war towards Nero. But we will no longer be calling Churchill by his given name. Instead, he will be referred to as of now as Piso. Before closing out the final log, he tells us that he fears the mistakes that he has made, knowing that it has been eating him alive ever since. He knows he is powerless now against the Starkill, seemingly staring down the face of infinity and giving us the phrase, "Knowledge betrays man's ego." The final video to end out Interlude A is here. We get to see what exactly the fake bringer report is. On April 7th, 1999, Jacob Evryn had managed to infiltrate the now Starkill-infested Babel site and retrieved intel regarding the Starkill's operations. But amongst the findings was a file containing about Dr. Robert Spencer's assimilation and subsequent transformation done by Home Delta and the Starkill. This event will later be called the Rebirth Event, and had led to the growth of a Starkill mass far larger than any other biomass previously recorded. The central intelligence of the Starkill mass had obtained the ability to mimic human speech. Back in stages, it said that there was a hypothetical fourth stage to the Starkill, one only based on critical mass calculations. The results following that of Robert Spencer's assimilation could actually prove that Admiral Nero could potentially be an example of this fourth stage that Home was so skeptical about, as they themselves were unsure when this could happen. We go back to see what exactly happened during the events of the assimilation. In only just 500 milliseconds, the Starkill had managed to spread all the way to the room where Dr. Spencer's cryopod was in, eventually spreading down the hallways and vents to even reaching the Tower of Babel itself, using it as a way to give direct command to the Deathbringer squads prepared to fight alongside Home Delta during Operation Homebound. Later on in the video, we finally get some footage of the aftermath, seeing just how much the Starkill had went through and affected the Babel site, but then finding out that the Starkill had used the Tower of Babel to grow to its extreme size. Not just this, but it was also hypothesized that this attack was premeditated. So, we covered plenty of ground leading up to Act 2. Constant failures of both Home and Home Delta trying to desperately contain a hyper-intelligent virus growing outside the United States that more so operates closely similar to the Flood from Halo. As for what could be the very hypothetical fourth stage of the Starkill seemingly sprouting out in front of them as Admiral Nero. Not just this, but now Churchill is on the run from his own creation, desperate to still try and fix whatever mistakes he has done while still poking around and finding out more about the Starkill itself. But while doing a bit of updating to this script, I've decided to tally up some very concerning things regarding Dr. Churchill. And that's mainly due to the crimes that he alone has committed against his own colleagues, Home Delta staff, and even that of the Deathbringer squads. Also, just one more thing to add before we get into Act 2 of Midwest Angelica, I wanted to say a huge thank you to you all that have supported my channel, and actually stuck around to seeing this video being produced. I also wanted to point out that I have a Patreon set up as well, as it will mostly be used to give people behind the scenes updates or even early releases of what videos I'm currently working on at the moment. So, with all that out of the way, let's dive straight into Act 2. Today's date, April 13th, 1999. Operation Homebound is about to commence. The Deathbringer squads are ready in command by Admiral Nero. Home HQ is determined to be completely assimilated by then. Around 12:01 a.m., AGM-114 Hellfire bombardment of Home HQ commences. The first Starkill threat had been obliterated. At 12:03 a.m., ground forces are sent to raid the Long Pine Altar, which has also now been obliterated. At 12:10 a.m., an orbital bombardment is made on the Alpha Chunk and Starfield Ranch, as the threats of those are also obliterated, finally closing out Operation Homebound and leaving no Starkill threats alive.
As per the request of Admiral Nero of Home Delta Division, this report is to be given to the Select Committee consisting of the Secretary of Defense and the National Aeronautics and Space Administration on the date of April 14, 1999. This report is classified as top secret in an effort to preserve national security. On April 13th, Home Delta forces managed to successfully eliminate all known traces of the Starkill threat. While some Starkill spores remain in the atmosphere around operational zones in the Midwest, these spores were discovered to be inert without the presence of a central biomass hub. Research is now underway at various institutions across the United States to uncover the Starkill's true nature and functionality. Preliminary research performed by Home Delta has led to hypotheses surrounding the possible origins for AZ-001, or possible instances of AZ-001's arrival to Earth in the past. Throughout written history, world cultures and religions describe some variation of an apocalyptic deluge, in which a great destructive force violently brings civilization to an end. Researchers believe this deluge is representative of the organism known as AZ-001 and the subsequent Starkill infestation. It is believed that the civilization and the event occurs in cycles, though much remains uncertain at this time. However, what we do know is that the cycle of destruction and violence has finally been brought to an end with the might of the United States military. We may very well even have stopped the power of God himself with just a fraction of our military capabilities. Find solace in that fact, the fact that we have nothing more to fear in this universe, for we have become stronger than God. The oppressed have become the oppressor, and only oppressors have the freedom to choose peace and end the cycle of violence. Admiral Nero, I commend your efforts. You lurked among the shadows as you played your hand. I'm fully aware. You may try to kill me now, but know that the man speaking in front of this committee right now is actually a death row inmate scheduled for execution. I too am playing your game, Nero, and I'm prepared to...
After the broadcast, it turned out that the man that was posing as General Pizzo was confirmed to be a death row inmate by the name of Isaac Dunn. Churchill likely did this as a way to avoid death in case something like this were chosen to occur during this meeting. But as of now, General Pizzo's current whereabouts remain unknown to the public or any bits left of Home Delta. After Admiral Nero taunts not just Pizzo, but all who had seemingly participated in the eradication of the Starkill, a small screen is shown to us, that of another chunk separating from the main body of the Starkill, before closing out with the words, Despite all the efforts of Operation Homebound, the Starkill had touched down yet again, bringing the potential end of Admiral Nero, but not fully stopping the infestation. As for now, we will have to look even deeper in the Earth. as the Starkill isn't only on land now, but mutating in the water as well. Our next video starts off with the following footage recorded by Dr. Churchill, telling us that Home Delta was strategically and covertly assimilated by the Starkill on April 4th, 1999. The day that Robert Spencer's had also been assimilated by the Starkill and leading to the creation of Admiral Nero, later being dubbed as the Rebirth event. During the conversation, we believe that another person may now be in direct communication with special operatives at the Pentagon, telling us that the events that transpired at the conference was more so a result in lapse of security on their part. The man covering up for Pizzo was a mere death row inmate and eliminated. The unknown man chimes in to question if Admiral Nero was indeed the alias chosen by the now assimilated Robert Spencer's, and asks what his current condition is, only knowing up to when he was placed in cryogenic sleep as a result of Dr. Ezra's sudden attack on him. The special operative tells us that Spencer had somehow managed to recover from the infection via surgery, and saying that Dr. Spencer's himself had ordered that Dr. Churchill to be executed by any means possible, and that he had somehow been succumbed by the Starkill's infection, which doesn't exactly sound right, not even in the slightest. As we currently know of, Dr. Churchill had remained unscathed by any Starkill threats near him, only coming face to face with that of the Deathbringer squad ordered by Dr. Nero himself at the events of Exodus. Churchill later comes in, telling us that it's been over a week since he's last received contact from Fakebringer, knowing that eventually some kind of cover-up will lead him into the position he's in now, and placing the burden of humanity's future upon him. At this point, Churchill can no longer deny that he's been evading his duty to humanity, sending others out to possibly never return again. Churchill is now alone in this never-ending crusade against the Starkill, but with nothing left for him, he still decides to carry out his duty, later telling us that the central consciousness of the Starkill had made landfall, yet it remains unknown to where it could possibly be, eventually pulling out one of the Akashic probes that is going to be used to extract the knowledge and memories of the Starkill from the hypothetical central chunk. Once the intel is retrieved, the United States can finally initiate a counterattack to potentially wipe out the Starkill by using its own memories. Churchill had already drawn out where this possible beta chunk could be, as one of the current cores of one of the Starkill hubs is located at the Babel site, with one final message by Churchill.
No matter what, I must survive and locate the beta chunk before darkness falls on humanity. This is the final stand, and I must do it alone.
As Churchill makes his way into the affected Babel site, he manages to spot an Akashic node that is communicating with the beta chunk, the shape of an antenna itself scattering the signals to prevent direct communication. Eventually, we see what appears to be some kind of humanoid figure emerging from the top of the antenna, speaking to Churchill, yet we don't really know what it's saying. We later cut to Churchill being hooked up by wires in a large facility. During this encounter, his mental stability had managed to somehow drop to 89%. So what we can gather up for now about these weird humanoid figures is that they can somehow alter or completely take over a person's mental fortitude if given the right conditions. Later on, we see the path that Churchill is taking across Missouri, as we now jump to May 30th, marking that it's now been a month into the search for the beta chunk. Yet, the Starkill signal response has only been just that of background noise for all the locations that was scouted, remarking that it's doing a good job at keeping itself completely concealed. Eventually zooming into a sign labeled Paradise, as some of it is being covered up in a message that only reads out as Hell. Churchill takes this as a potential clue for his scouting, heading back out on the road and finally making his way into the town. As he searches around the forest, the Starkill spore reader begins to go off once Churchill reaches a nearby lake. Now knowing that the Starkill itself is not just spreading inside of it, but also burying itself underneath it to keep itself hidden, eventually digging away into a network underneath the town, showing us an almost fleshy cave made by the Starkill. He remarks by saying that this infection alone is at least a temple classification, using the water nearby as a cooling vent as opposed to that of the mushroom structures used for the infection to move through the air. Soon, he manages to reach a point inside of the network, as the camera begins to malfunction just by getting closer to the source.
Just like the stories told long ago, your sacrifice will not go in vain. I'll see to it that your package is delivered safely.
Who are you?
You know my name. Bishop Motionfield. I am the unbounded soul. The consciousness within. Eternal but cyclical. But your story ends here, Churchill. Beautiful narrative perfection. Let your sacrifice bestow hope upon humanity.
And so with that, Churchill had succumbed to the Starkill infection, his mind being flooded with the Akashic Eternal Consciousness, but back in the conversation with the Unbound Soul, it said that Churchill's sacrifice will not go in vain, possibly giving hope that the Akashic probe will soon be recovered and eventually be used to go against the Starkill as planned. These Unbound Souls almost having a way of guiding those it seeks out to, or upon stumbling across one, yet are still extremely dangerous given the fact that they can completely render a person unstable or completely annihilate the brains to the point where they would be assimilated by the Akashic Eternal Consciousness. Our next video opens up to a man by the name of Marcus Lucan, an independent journalist from Kansas City, Missouri. He claims that on May 29th he managed to spot something unexplainable. Yeah, that pretty much clarifies his suspicions. I can't exactly piece together what form the Starkill this may be, but to say that this won't be in public eye would just be a complete lie. Lucan manages to find that the very broadcast station was hosted in Paradise, Missouri, heading over there to possibly uncover some of the answers as to what he had managed to witness. As we arrive, he heads into a suburban area. Nothing out of the norm happening. The neighborhood is pretty much quiet all throughout its trip. Eventually, Lucan heads down a path, stopping at a nearby lake as something manages to catch his eyes, as it's none other than the Starkill that we had just witnessed. But it appears that it's pouring something out. Lucan decides that the best way to find out what this could possibly be is to get closer, eventually stumbling upon a playground where the Starkill is infecting nearby areas of it. Not just this, but we're also shown that the lake from earlier had now turned almost completely red. Lucan tells us that it may have went into the water supply. With nothing else to do, he heads back to his car, still confused as to what he had just witnessed. It isn't until he stumbles upon one of the houses in the area that he finds out that the very thing that he had just witnessed was alive. After a few minutes, Lucan finds himself at a nearby hotel to stay for the night. Everything inside of the motel seemed to be pretty fine until he went to check the water, which had also been infected by the Starkill. Lucan decides to set up a camera somewhere around his room while he sleeps, and will continue his investigation later tomorrow. Around 11:56, one of the doors opens to reveal to us an eerie glowing figure standing in front of Lucan's bed, which was one of the Unbound Souls. But one thing has me kind of stumped now, is that despite being visited by the Unbound Soul, Lucan wakes up feeling like he has much more energy now. His fears of what may be out there are seemingly gone, but how? Whenever we first encountered it, it completely ruined Churchill's mental fortitude. So how exactly did it not do the same to Lucan? But for now, we will continue the video. As Lucan continues his investigation, he stops by the side of the road as he heads out into a field, later turning his camera to see something absolutely massive in the distance. But something feels off about this now. Lucan seems to be almost unfazed by what he had just witnessed, more so just brushing it off. For now, Lucan heads back to the lake as the hours pass. He later stumbles upon the same thing that he was looking for in the news broadcast. Later on in the recordings, Lucan decides to go into one of the forests nearby, wandering around the lake that he had originally spotted the floating Starcom mass, as he suddenly stops in his tracks completely, spotting one of the unbound souls that was in the same room with him last night. But yet again, he still seems to be completely unfazed by the strange things happening around him. Still continuing on his path, Lucan dives deeper into the forest. He finally spots the very thing that was supposedly calling to him, a deep pit, that of which Dr. Churchill had dug into to retrieve the memories of the Starkill. After a couple of minutes, Lucan zooms into it, saying that this cave is actually alive. The flesh is constantly moving, yet it doesn't take any shape. It's surprisingly stable, despite it being underneath the lake that Lucan was investigating, eventually stopping in front of what seems to be a potentially assimilated member of Home Delta, which we now know is none other than Dr. Gamma Churchill. We finally get to finish out, as we're immediately brought into the footage of the cave that Lucan is currently in. We're immediately greeted by Churchill, as it turns out that he's still somehow conscious after his mind had originally been flooded by the unbound soul, handing the Akashic probe to Lucan and telling him,
"Take this. Pentagon. Who are you?" CIA. It's for humanity. Take the camera. I don't understand. Go. Sir.
The video cuts to Lucan, now frantically running out of the forest, even getting back into his car and heading straight for the Pentagon, still confused on who exactly the man was in the cave, yet assures that there could still be answers for him. As Lucan is still making his way to the Pentagon, he begins to start coughing, eventually stopping on the side of the road as it seems to be getting worse, as we're suddenly brought into a horrific scene. Lucan was never found again. Proper quarantine methods have been enacted in regard to the Lucan materials, with the information contained within the Akashic probe, including the truth behind Home Delta, which has now led to the United States government to forming a new division of Home, with one final message to us: the gospel of truth has been revealed. So, we're finally at the point where Midwest Angelica is currently at, as a new division of Home by the name of Home Gamma Majestic has been created. The video starts out as an Akashic memory recall system, as we now know that both sacrifices of Lucan and Churchill had not gone in vain. As the system boots up, we're brought into a screen showing us the classifications, Earth locations, biological memory, and unknown data. The first classification we get is the Alters, the smallest Starkill biomass collected, capable of commanding and producing two types of entities. The first entity to come out of them are Phantoms, as they are described to appear nearly indistinguishable from humans at first, but have the capability to transform into wretches. As for wretches, they are humanoid Starkill entities that could be produced from altered biomass or from converted phantoms. The second structure we are shown are that of temples, which are a larger concentration of Starkill biomass. With biomass extending deep underground, it can produce any entity known as wraiths that can come in different shapes depending on the nature of the temple. It can grow to be 200 feet tall. For the next entity are revenants, as they excrete pores from their bodies and are able to float using natural helium reserves. As we try to get more data from the Akashic probe, we run into a system error, as the unlisted objects that appear are the third structure that the Starkill can take, which are overtures, and the entities produced by it are labeled as Titans. With all the classifications out of the way, we get into the biological memory as a single timeline is presented, one that runs through the beginning of the Starkill's touchdown on Earth to where the aftermath of Apostles is, and underneath it is another page simply labeled Unknown. As we go to check it out, we're brought into a scene that's completely indiscernible, eventually giving out an error as we're brought back into the main screen, later checking on what that unknown data can be. So that didn't work either. It's revealed to us that the contents of the Akashic probe had managed to reveal the Starkill's secret operations, as it had been revealed to the United States government that Home Delta was completely assimilated and is now under the control of the hyper-intelligent biomass hive mind, as the Starkill infection and biomass collectively refers to itself as Azazel. But much of the contents of the Akashic probe appear to be indecipherable or encrypted in a way that's impossible for even the most powerful computers to crack at the moment. However, enough information was actually recovered from Home Gamma Majestic to start devising countermeasures against the Starkill altogether, eventually showing us what appears to be the very thing that they have been working on, a supercomputer by the name of Dawnstar. So, with all of that covers the majority of what's currently happening in Midwest Angelica. The Starkill is now a national threat to the United States, gaining more and more power as the series continues, as it manages to create much more powerful structures and entities later on in the series, with Operation Homebound only proving to be completely futile against it. Yet, we now at least have some hope as the collective efforts of Churchill and Lucan have managed to get into the United States government, provoking them to creating a new branch of Home entirely with the goal of understanding the Starkill even more, to the point where they can strike back effectively, using its own memories against itself, and finally ending the national threat. But with the series still ongoing, it will be a bit of time before we can finally see this counterattack and potential end to the series altogether. It is definitely one of the best series that I've watched and had the pleasure of reviewing tonight. And so with that, ends this video for you all. I do hope you enjoyed, and please do check out the series for yourself, as it's one that can easily fascinate you with how much world building it has. Not just that, but the visuals themselves also being a great asset to it. I do hope to see more of it, and we'll stick around to seeing the end of it.